Have you ever stopped to truly consider the silent, massive mission that's happening constantly right on our coasts and way beyond? You know, who keeps our shipping lanes moving, makes sure our waters are safe for business and, well, just for fun, and helps us figure out what's going on in our huge oceans.
It's this incredibly complex operation happening every single day.
Right? It's like this critical ballet performed by some really dedicated organizations. And today, we're taking a deep dive into, well, their future blueprint. We're looking at crucial new legislative provisions hitting the U.S. Coast Guard and NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration.
Yeah, and these aren't just, dusty legal papers. They're more like a living roadmap. They show us what's becoming important, what these organizations actually need to safeguard our coasts, keep commerce flowing, and look after our natural resources.
Exactly. We're literally peeling back the layers of a recent legislative bill. It's this big document laying out what Congress is saying these vital agencies need to do. We're breaking down what it really means for how the Coast Guard and NOAA are going to operate. Everything from, like, their buildings and ships,
Into their people, their well-being.
and even how they're tackling new challenges, the stuff popping up in our modern world.
Right.
So our mission today, pretty straightforward. We want to pull out the most important bits of knowledge, the key insights from all this dense material, give you a shortcut, basically, so you're really well informed.
And find some surprising stuff along the way.
Yeah, we'll uncover some interesting facts, look at the why behind these changes, and show you why this stuff matters directly to you. Whether you care about national security, protecting the environment, or just, getting your packages on time.
It all connects back.
It really does. Okay, let's unpack this blueprint for our maritime future.
Let's do it.
So, the U.S. Coast Guard, they're always adapting, aren't they? Responding to disasters, dealing with complex global situations. Their world is constantly shifting.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's in their DNA. And this new bill really reflects that dynamism. It highlights some pretty big changes in how they manage their physical stuff, their assets, and their critical operations.
And also, crucially, how they work with other countries, right? Those international partnerships.
Exactly. It's fascinating, actually, how these, well, they might seem like small technical tweaks or specific plans, but they all add up to this much bigger picture of being ready, being resilient. They're not just random changes. They're part of a strategy looking ahead.
Okay, so where do we start?
Let's kick off with sections 131 and 132. They deal with something that sounds maybe a bit dull: minor construction projects and tsunami preparedness.
Minor construction, right. So for years, the Coast Guard had this limit, this ceiling, for what counted as a minor project, yeah. Stuff they could do without a massive song and dance with Congress.
Exactly. Smaller, but still essential infrastructure work. Historically, that cap was $1.5 million.
Okay.
This bill bumps that up to $2 million.
So $500,000 more. Why is that such a big deal? It doesn't sound huge in the grand scheme of government spending.
Well, for the Coast Guard commanders on the ground, it's actually a pretty significant boost in agility. It gives them more flexibility. They can get critical repairs or upgrades done much faster with less bureaucratic hassle.
Ah, okay. Less red tape.
Precisely. Think about a remote Coast Guard station, maybe way out in the Aleutians. A big storm damages a key navigation beacon, or a pier needs urgent repairs.
Right.
This change lets them tackle that $1.8 million fix, maybe, much more quickly. It ensures their facilities, and more importantly, their ability to operate, are ready to go even after something hits.
Keeps them primed and ready. Gotcha.
And that increased flexibility, it connects directly to the tsunami preparedness part in Section 132. This specifically requires detailed preparedness plans for any Coast Guard property that's in a designated tsunami inundation zone.
So areas known to be at risk.
Exactly. And this isn't just about protecting the buildings themselves, the concrete and steel. It's about protecting their people and the specialized gear they absolutely need to respond right after a tsunami hits.
Because they're the ones who have to go out when everyone else is trying to get in?
That's it. Their own ability to survive and stay operational is paramount. It's acknowledging that for an agency tasked with saving lives, they need to be ready themselves.
So for someone listening, especially if they live near the coast, what does this mean? How does it affect them?
Well, it directly impacts safety and how effective that emergency response can be. It's about making sure the first responders themselves are ready, even when nature throws the worst at them.
Okay.
Think about a Coast Guard station, somewhere really vulnerable, like the Pacific Northwest. Big earthquake risk, potential tsunami.
Right.
This bill pushes for things like vertical evacuation structures, which means basically building higher ground into their facilities. Think strong, multi-story buildings designed so personnel and equipment can get above the expected wave height.
Wow, so they can write it out and then get to work.
Precisely. It directly boosts their ability to respond after the disaster, which is exactly when communities need them most for search and rescue, helping reestablish supply lines, all of that. It's proactive resilience, not just cleaning up afterwards.
That makes a lot of sense, building resilience in before the disaster strikes.
Okay, so moving from those sudden, unpredictable disasters to something more seasonal but just as challenging.
Yeah.
Ice. Sections 115 and 185 really zero in on boosting ice-breaking capabilities.
Ah, yeah. Crucial for certain parts of the country.
Absolutely. The bill mandates building a new Great Lakes icebreaker, and it specifies it needs to be at least as capable as the current workhorse, the Coast Guard cutter Mackinac.
The Mackinac, right? That's a serious piece of kit.
It is. And the goal says they need to move on this as fast as possible once the funding is there. It shows a clear commitment to keeping maritime commerce flowing, even when the lakes freeze over.
And it's not just the new ship, is it? There's more about the existing fleet.
Correct. There's also a mandate for a pretty robust 5-year pilot program, specifically for the Great Lakes icebreaking fleet.
Okay, what's the goal there?
The main goal is to really measure their ability to keep what they call Tier 1 and Tier 2 waterways open 95% of the time during the ice season.
Tier 1 and Tier 2, those are the most important shipping channels.
That's right. The absolute arteries of commerce in the region, that 95% target, that's a really specific, demanding performance goal for keeping the economy moving.
Wow.
Plus, there's a required report looking at the replacement strategy for the Bay-class icebreaking tug fleet. That signals they know they have an aging but vital part of the fleet that needs a plan for the future.
So this isn't just like a technical thing for ship captains. This is about protecting our economic lifelines, making sure things don't literally grind to a halt in winter.
Exactly. It underlines just how important icebreaking is, not just for, say, military readiness and accessing ports, but for the whole economic fabric of the Great Lakes region and beyond. Think about grain shipments, raw materials for factories, manufactured goods, all needing to move through those waterways in winter.
Right. Stuff we rely on.
Without enough icebreaking, commerce can literally freeze. That sends ripples through industries, affects jobs, messes with supply chains. And focusing on replacing those older Bay-class tugs, that's a proactive move to make sure they have the capability they need down the road. It really is about national security, but in an economic sense.
So we're talking about ensuring everything from, I don't know, the food on your grocery shelves to the steel needed for construction keeps moving, keeping those economic arteries open no matter how cold it gets.
Precisely.
But the Coast Guard's job isn't just here at home, is it? It's increasingly global. And sections 139 and 140 seem to get into that, talking about surveillance and working with other countries, specifically Taiwan.
Yeah, zooming out a bit, these sections really highlight that dual role the Coast Guard plays now. Strong domestic security, but also agile international diplomacy. They're acting almost like a force multiplier in key regions around the world. Well, the bill directs them to get these advanced tactical maritime surveillance systems for really high traffic strategic spots like San Diego, San Juan in Puerto Rico, and Key West.
Okay, so better eyes on the water.
More than just eyes. It's about integrating things like advanced analytics, maybe even AI, to build a better picture of what's happening out there, maritime domain awareness. Identifying suspicious stuff, potential threats, faster and more accurately, turning all that data
into usable intelligence.
Exactly. For every ship, every boat, moving through those areas.
And the Taiwan connection? That sounds significant.
It is. The bill mandates a solid plan to significantly step up joint and integrated maritime operational and leadership training with the Taiwan Coast Guard Administration.
Joint training, so not just sharing notes, but actually working together.
Right. Building deeper relationships, making sure they can operate together smoothly, interoperability in a really vital strategic region.
And what kind of training are we talking about?
The bill is specific. It's aimed at combating illegal, unreported, and unregulated fishing, IUU fishing, which is a huge global problem.
Yeah, devastating for fish stocks.
And also counter illicit drug trafficking, particularly in the South China Sea, which is a major transit zone.
So very specific shared security concerns.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The focus on Taiwan clearly reflects its geopolitical importance and these mutual concerns in a region where maritime stability is just crucial. And the payoff. Better surveillance helps intercept drug shipments, which directly impacts safety here by reducing the flow of illegal drugs. And working with Taiwan on IUU fishing helps tackle global problems like overfishing and environmental damage, which affect everyone, including us. It really shows the Coast Guard acting as a key part of our diplomatic outreach, that soft power aspect.
Interesting. So connecting the global back to the local, what about how the Coast Guard manages its own property here at home? Sections 143 and 144 seem to touch on that, and also cultural resources.
Yes, this is about responsible management on the home front. The bill introduces something called an Enhanced Use Property Pilot Program.
Enhanced use, what does that mean?
It gives the Coast Guard new flexibility. They can enter into contracts for property. They aren't fully using underutilized property, often at fair market value.
Okay, so they can lease out land or buildings they don't need?
Essentially, yes. It allows them to be more financially agile. They could generate revenue or maybe get other services they need in return, like housing for their people or help with environmental cleanup on a site.
Ah, okay. So it could potentially save taxpayer money or get them needed services without direct funding?
Exactly. It's a more modern, adaptive way to manage federal real estate. And alongside that, the bill outlines clear authority for cooperative agreements.
Cooperative agreements? With who?
With eligible groups like states, tribal governments, nonprofits. The goal is collaborative management of cultural resources and natural resources on or near Coast Guard installations.
Cultural resources, what does that cover?
The bill is quite specific and broad here. It includes sacred sites, archaeological resources, and resources covered by tribal treaties. It's a real acknowledgement of the deep historical and spiritual connections many indigenous communities have to these lands the Coast Guard operates on.
That feels like a significant shift. More collaboration, more respect for heritage.
It really is. It signals a move towards managing land together, recognizing the importance of being good environmental stewards and respecting indigenous heritage.
So you could imagine, say, an old Coast Guard site being leased out to generate funds, or a situation where they partner with a local tribe to protect a sacred site or restore a salmon stream on their property.
Precisely those kinds of scenarios. It helps build better community relations and ensures federal lands are used responsibly and thoughtfully. For the listener, it shows a much more modern, flexible approach to federal property, balancing the Coast Guard's mission needs with community interests and environmental protection. Being good neighbors, essentially.
Yeah, and good stewards of shared resources. Makes sense. Okay, so that's infrastructure, operations, partnerships. What about the people in the Coast Guard?
Right, because ultimately any organization, especially one like the Coast Guard, relies entirely on its people, their readiness, their well-being.
Yeah.
This next chunk of the bill really focuses on that, recruiting, retaining, and supporting the workforce.
Okay, critical stuff. Where do we start there?
Let's look at Section 151 first. This grants the Coast Guard direct hire authority for certain critical jobs.
Direct hire authority. That sounds technical, but you mentioned agility earlier. Is this related?
Very much so. It's actually a huge tool for them. Federal hiring, as you probably know, can be incredibly slow and cumbersome.
Months, sometimes years, right?
Easily. It creates real bottlenecks when you urgently need someone. Direct hire authority lets the Coast Guard bypass a lot of that lengthy process for specific, vital roles.
So what roles are we talking about? What does this mean for the folks serving?
It means getting them the support they need faster. We're talking about critical positions like medical and health professionals, vital for immediate care. Also, childcare staff, huge for families, housing office staff, and importantly, integrated primary prevention specialists.
Prevention specialists, what do they do?
They're focused on preventing harmful behaviors, things like suicide, sexual assault, harassment, domestic abuse. Getting those specialists in place quickly is key.
Absolutely.
This authority also covers Coast Guard investigative service agents and certain folks at the Academy, civilian professors, health and well-being staff. It's specifically triggered when there's a proven shortage of qualified candidates or a critical hiring need. Lets them fill urgent gaps fast.
So it cuts through the red tape for the most pressing needs. Makes sense. What else on personnel?
The bill also temporarily exempts E8s and E9s, the most senior enlisted leaders, Master Chiefs and Senior Chiefs, from the authorized end strength limits.
Okay, why do that?
It suggests a real focus on keeping experienced leadership. These senior NCOs are the backbone, the institutional memory. Exempting them from the caps means they can retain that vital experience, maybe keep people on a bit longer if needed, ensuring stability.
Gotcha. So retaining experience at the top of the enlisted ranks.
Exactly. And think about the practical impact of faster hiring. better access to medical and mental health care. Childcare support makes life easier for families. Prevention specialists can start addressing cultural challenges sooner. It all adds up to better quality of life, better morale, better support for members and their families.
Which, in turn, helps them do their jobs better.
Precisely. It directly enhances their ability to serve.
Okay, building on that family support idea, Sections 154, 155, and 156 seem to address family leave and housing.
Yes, crucial aspects for retention and well-being. The bill modifies family leave rules. It allows leave to be taken beyond the usual one-year window after, say, a birth or adoption.
Why the extra flexibility?
It acknowledges the reality of military life. Operational requirements, professional military education obligations, or other reasonable circumstances can now justify extending that leave period.
So if someone's deployed or at a long school right after a child arrives, they don't lose that leave.
Exactly. It's recognizing those unique work-life balance challenges, making service more sustainable for families. It's a really important acknowledgement.
That sounds like a really positive change.
And there's a smaller, but I think really practical and thoughtful change, authorizing a maternity uniform allowance for officers.
So helping cover the cost of different uniforms during pregnancy.
Yes. It addresses a real financial and practical burden. A small thing, but it shows support during a significant time.
Definitely. And housing, Section 156.
Right. This allows the Commandant to acquire existing family housing units, maybe privately owned homes or HUD properties, instead of always having to build new ones.
Oh, that seems smart. Potentially faster and cheaper.
Very likely, especially in high-cost areas or places where land is scarce. It's a cost-effective alternative. And importantly, there's a temporary waiver on net floor area limits.
Meaning they can get slightly smaller or larger places than the standard if needed.
It gives them flexibility to get housing that actually fits families appropriately, without being rigidly bound by size standards that might not match the local market, and without the massive lead times and costs of new construction.
Okay, so faster leave flexibility, maternity uniforms, smarter housing options. It all seems aimed at retention, right? Making service more family-friendly.
Absolutely. A more supported environment for families boosts morale, cuts down on people leaving the service attrition, and helps the Coast Guard keep its experienced members. It really makes you think, doesn't it? How these seemingly small policy tweaks actually impact overall readiness and retention. It's all about supporting the human element.
Yeah, that human element is key. And one of the most critical parts of that has to be mental and behavioral health, right? That seems to be a huge focus in this bill.
A massive focus. Sections 157, 158, 159, 161, and then looping back to 503 and 504. It's extensive. They're authorizing a behavioral health technician pilot program.
Okay, what does that involve?
It's about embedding behavioral health care right into Coast Guard clinics. These technicians, E5 or higher, or civilians, will provide assessments, services, education, right there, easily accessible.
Integrated care.
Yes. And significantly, the program has to report on how many members are served and, crucially, their return-to-duty rates.
So measuring effectiveness. Are people getting the help they need to get back to their jobs?
Precisely. It addresses that access to care challenge, especially for units that are constantly busy or deployed.
Yeah.
And measuring return to duty shows they're focused on outcomes, not just providing services.
What else on behavioral health?
The Commandant is mandated to hire not fewer than 5 additional behavioral health specialists. And here's a really important detail. 35% of them must have experience with military sexual trauma.
Wow. That's specific and incredibly necessary given the challenges.
It's a direct, powerful response. A clear commitment to specialized, trauma-informed support for survivors. No ambiguity there.
That's encouraging. Anything else supporting members?
Yes, there's a very interesting tuition assistance and advanced education assistance pilot program for sea duty.
Sea duty. That's notoriously tough, hard to fill sometimes.
Exactly. So this program incentivizes it. It offers increased tuition assistance caps and reduced service obligations after you successfully complete your sea duty tour.
So using education benefits as a carrot for tough assignments. Smart.
It links education directly to service needs, tackling a known retention problem for demanding roles. Sometimes, investing in someone's future is the best incentive.
Makes sense. And you mentioned GAO studies.
Right. The Controller General is tasked with studies on overall Coast Guard behavioral health care and resources for personnel wellness. They'll also look at efforts to fix the problem of missing or incomplete medical records.
That sounds like a big deal for veterans later on.
Huge. And improving data sharing with the VA. These studies signal a real recognition of systemic issues and a commitment to transparency in fixing them. Missing records can seriously harm a veteran's ability to get benefits and care down the line.
So, taken together, this is a massive push on well-being.
It really is a holistic focus. Think about someone coming back from a really stressful deployment. These measures aim to ensure immediate confidential support is available, hopefully reducing burnout, improving long-term health. It shows a commitment beyond just physical readiness. It's about the whole person.
That holistic approach seems vital. Now, there's one more personnel item that caught my eye. Section 165, training on Congress.
Ah, yes, that's a fascinating one. The Commandant is required to develop and offer an annual training course for Coast Guard personnel, specifically about the workings of Congress and the federal legislative process.
Really? Like a civics lesson for Coast Guard members. What?
It's more than just civics. It's strategic. It's about enhancing their legislative affairs literacy, recognizing that understanding how Washington works is crucial for the Coast Guard itself.
How so? For funding?
Funding is a huge part of it, yes. But also for explaining their missions effectively, navigating the whole federal landscape. The course is detailed, history and structure of Congress, committee systems, types of legislative documents,
Bills, resolutions.
the budget process, authorization versus appropriation, the Senate's role in advice and consent. It even covers the roles of members and their staff and congressional oversight.
That's pretty comprehensive.
It is, and interestingly, at least 60% of the lecturers have to be outside experts, bringing real-world experience. They can even accept pro bono services for this.
So, getting top-tier insight, what's the practical benefit?
Think about a Coast Guard leader trying to advocate for a new cutter or resources for their unit. If they understand the budget process, how committees work, how to talk to staffers, they can be much more effective.
Ah, okay. It helps them make their case better.
Exactly. It directly boosts the organization's ability to get the support it needs from policymakers,
Right.
which ultimately impacts their ability to do everything else we've been talking about. It's an investment in their own future effectiveness.
That's a really interesting, almost unexpected piece of this, equipping them to navigate DC. Okay, so we've covered internal operations, personnel. What about the Coast Guard and NOAA's role out on the water? Safety, regulation.
Right, their external functions, ensuring safety and order across all our waterways, from the smallest boat to the biggest container ship. This next section digs into how they're adapting there, especially with new tech and challenges.
Okay, where do we start with that?
Sections 201, 202, and 203 focus on merchant mariners, the folks who crew commercial vessels. It starts with redefining nautical school program, basically clarifying what counts as approved training.
Ensuring quality and consistency.
Exactly. And it modifies the general requirements for merchant mariner credentials, the licenses and documents they need. Changes cover age, sea service, qualifications, physical standards like sight and hearing.
Pretty standard updates, maybe?
Some are standard, but here's a big one. It formally allows substituting some required sea service time with advanced lab work and, crucially, full mission simulator training.
Ah, simulators. That's a nod to modern training, isn't it?
Absolutely. It acknowledges that high-fidelity simulators can provide incredibly realistic, valuable, and repeatable training in a safe environment. It could potentially speed up training without lowering standards.
Makes sense. You can practice emergency scenarios much more easily in a sim.
Precisely. And for one specific credential, Able Seaman Limited, kind of an entry-level deckhand role, the required sea time is reduced from 18 months to 12 months. Again, likely reflecting that modern training can bring people up to speed faster.
So adapting to new training methods, maybe addressing workforce needs too.
That's likely part of it, making the pathway potentially more efficient while still maintaining safety. And critically, the bill mandates major improvements to the electronic merchant mariner credentialing system.
Oh, I've heard mariners complain about the paperwork for years.
It's been notoriously slow and cumbersome. This pushes for fully electronic submissions, easier data access. It aims to streamline a process that's been a real bottleneck, delaying mariners getting to work and impacting the whole maritime workforce pipeline.
So faster credentialing means more qualified mariners available sooner. Good for shipping, good for supply chains.
That's the goal. It's fascinating how these technical tweaks reflect that bigger effort adapting to tech workforce needs, but always with safety as the foundation.
Safety is paramount. And speaking of safety, technology keeps changing on the water too, doesn't it? Sections 211 through 213 and then 231 to 234 seem to address vessel safety and new tech like amphibious craft and autonomous systems.
Yes, keeping pace with innovation is key. First, the bill significantly ramps up penalties for grossly negligent operations of a vessel. It makes it a Class E felony, plus up to a $35,000 civil penalty.
Okay, sending a strong message about unsafe behavior.
A very strong message. Deterrence is the aim. And the definition of a security risk for administrative actions now explicitly includes someone violating company policy, if that violation poses a threat to others on board.
So dealing with potential threats from within the vessel's own crew or passengers more directly.
Right, addressing immediate safety risks. The bill also requires a study on commercial amphibious vessels.
Like those duck boats.
Exactly. Given past accidents, the study aims to recommend specific safety regulations tailored for these unique vessels that operate both on land and water. It's a proactive regulatory approach.
Good to see them looking at that specifically. What about autonomous systems? Drones, uncrewed vessels? That's a huge area now.
It is, and the bill takes a comprehensive approach. It establishes an advisory committee on autonomous systems to give the Coast Guard expert advice on integrating these systems safely and securely, and how to regulate them more broadly.
So bringing in outside expertise.
Yes. And the Coast Guard itself has to develop a training course on small, uncrewed maritime systems under 35 feet, covering safe navigation, collision avoidance, what to do if the system fails.
Practical stuff for operating these things safely near other boats.
Absolutely. And beyond just training on them, the Commandant needs a strategy for acquiring and deploying both uncrewed systems for Coast Guard missions and counter-uncrewed system technologies.
Counter-drone tech for the water.
Essentially, yes. Recognizing the potential threats as well as the opportunities. So for anyone listening who boats, takes ferries, or relies on shipping, these rules aim to make the water safer as technology evolves.
It's about making sure safety measures and regulations keep up with the tech, protecting people, other vessels, and the environment.
Exactly.
Now, what about managing the physical space on the water? Things like where ships anchor or dealing with abandoned boats. Sections 220, 244, and 250 seem to cover that.
Yes, these address some really tangible, persistent problems. First, anchorages. The Commandant is directed to implement a plan to restructure the federal anchorages in San Pedro Bay. That's the massive port complex for LA and Long Beach.
Why restructure them?
The goal is to ensure a minimum 1-mile distance between anchored ships and underwater pipelines. And they need to work with monitoring companies to get audible and visual alarms if a ship gets too close to a pipeline.
Ah, pipeline safety. Trying to prevent accidents and spills.
Precisely. It's a direct response to those concerns, likely driven by past incidents.
Yeah.
Proactive prevention of costly, damaging accidents.
Okay, and the abandoned boats, that's something you see in a lot of harbors.
It's a huge problem. The bill brings in new, stronger regulations for abandoned and derelict vessel removals. It sets out clear procedures for determining abandonment, finding the owner, a 45-day notice period.
So a standardized process. Is there a penalty?
Yes, a civil penalty up to $500. Though there are exceptions for major extenuating circumstances, like if the owner is medically incapacitated long-term.
Okay, some teeth, but also some consideration.
And crucially, the Coast Guard has to create and maintain a national inventory of abandoned vessels. This includes GIS data, precise locations, and it has to be publicly available.
A national list of ghost ships? That could be really useful.
It aims to get a much better handle on the scale of the problem and manage it more systematically. These derelict vessels are navigation hazards, they pollute, they're eyesores. This tackles that persistent issue head-on.
So safer anchorages protect pipelines and prevent spills. And tackling derelict vessels cleans up waterways, makes them safer, protects ecosystems.
Especially after storms, right?
Exactly. Think about hurricane aftermath. This gives them better tools to deal with all those sunken or stranded boats more efficiently. It's about cleaning up those ghost ships for good.
Okay, this next section, it feels incredibly important and also very sensitive. Addressing sexual assault and harassment within the Coast Guard, especially at the Academy. This seems like a major focus of the bill. It is arguably the most significant and impactful section. It reflects a deep, necessary commitment to systemic change, aiming for a safer, more accountable environment for everyone serving.
Where does it start? Independent review.
Yes, sections 401, 402, 413, 414, and 415 mandate an independent review of the Coast Guard's reforms related to sexual assault and harassment. That signals a clear need for outside eyes to assess progress, find gaps, and help rebuild trust.
And evidence retention. That sounds critical.
Absolutely crucial. The bill requires a comprehensive policy on retention and access to evidence and records for sexual misconduct cases. And the timelines are striking. Forensic exam kits, retained for 100 years.
100 years, wow.
And criminal investigation records, 50 years. This is a monumental shift. It's a direct response to past failures where evidence was lost or destroyed, acknowledging the incredibly long tail of trauma and the need for justice, possibly decades later.
Ensures evidence isn't prematurely gone. Gives survivors hope, maybe.
That's the intent. And the policy must also guarantee victims swift access to their own records with faster processing and minimal redactions. That's about transparency and empowerment for survivors.
Giving them more control over their own information.
Exactly. The bill also mandates updated policies on military protective orders, aligning them with the DoD, and requires a strategy to implement recommendations from the DoD's big independent review commission on sexual assault.
So, learning from and aligning with the broader military effort, not operating in isolation.
Right, a systemic approach. And there's a new policy on care and support of victims, ensuring in-person introductions to support providers, follow-up, even if the victim is in a remote location.
So, robust support no matter where they are stationed.
The goal is clear, robust procedures for evidence, privacy, and support from the moment someone reports. It's about rebuilding trust, ensuring accountability, and changing the culture so reporting is met with help, not harm.
That culture change sounds essential.
Yeah.
What about specific capabilities and protections? There seem to be a lot of sections on that.
Yes. Sections 404 through 424 introduce special victim capabilities and strengthen whistleblower protections significantly. This includes designating specific officers with expertise in military justice or healthcare to handle sexual assault cases.
Specialized knowledge for sensitive cases.
Yes, and a huge one, establishing a safe-to-report policy.
Safe to report, what does that mean exactly?
It means a victim can report sexual misconduct without fearing prosecution for minor offenses they might have committed around the same time, like underage drinking, violating curfew.
Removing a major barrier to reporting? That seems massive.
It's potentially a game changer for encouraging reporting. The bill also requires quarterly briefings on misconduct involving senior leaders, increasing scrutiny at the top.
Accountability for everyone.
And another critical piece. If a member asserts they have PTSD, suffered sexual assault, or have a TBI, they must be offered a medical exam by a qualified professional before any involuntary separation.
So ensuring trauma is considered before kicking someone out.
A trauma-informed approach, fair treatment, appropriate care. There are also updates to the CAT-CH, a serial offender program, that database for tracking patterns of misconduct across services.
To identify repeat offenders sooner.
Exactly. Enhanced accountability for allegations against senior leaders, and a required report on whistleblower protections, specifically focused on preventing retaliation against those who speak up.
So protecting the people who report misconduct is key.
Absolutely vital. Imagine being a junior member witnessing something or experiencing it yourself. These provisions aim to create an environment where reporting is safe, investigations are thorough, and support is real, without fear of payback. It's about fostering trust, which is fundamental.
Trust is everything. Now, the Academy seems to get a huge amount of specific attention here. So many sections listed.
It's unprecedented, really. The sheer number of sections focused on the Academy 171 through 180, plus many in the 400s, shows an intense level of concern and a very deliberate, multi-pronged strategy to address misconduct and support cadets right from the start of their careers.
Getting into the very fabric of future leadership, trying to build a better environment from day one. What are some examples?
Well, the Board of Visitors to the Civilian Oversight Board gets modified with more congressional appointments, aiming for stronger external oversight. Studies are required on Academy oversight generally, but also on specifics like cadet room security, electronic locks, policies for room changes if someone feels unsafe.
Practical safety measures.
Very practical. A Coast Guard Academy Student Advisory Board is established, empowering cadets themselves to identify problems, including sexual assault harassment, and recommend solutions to leadership.
Giving students a direct voice.
Yes. Information on reporting and wellness support has to be visibly posted in dorms, and they need to install behavioral health and wellness rooms.
Wellness rooms? What are those like?
Designed for privacy, with phone and computer access, private Wi-Fi, safe, confidential spaces for cadets to seek help or report without fear of being overheard.
That sounds incredibly valuable.
And here's a powerful one for victims. A cadet who experiences sexual assault now has the right to request an expedited transfer to another military academy or an ROTC program.
Wow. An escape route, if needed, to continue their career elsewhere.
A critical support mechanism. Policies on sexual harassment violence must be reviewed and updated. The Academy has to get access to the main Defense Sexual Assault Incident Database, connecting them to the bigger military picture.
Sharing data, identifying broader patterns.
Right. And accountability extends even after service. Retired grade determinations for senior officers can be reopened if substantial evidence of sexual assault or failure to report comes to light later.
No escaping accountability, even in retirement.
That's the message. Misconduct information goes into permanent personnel records. Commanders have to review it. A flag officer has to sign off on involuntarily separating someone who reported sexual misconduct, another protection against retaliation. Expedited transfers for victims of sexual misconduct or domestic violence are authorized, with a temporary separation option.
Lots of layers of support and protection for victims.
And continuous vetting of security clearances. Plus, mandatory modifications to training programs on misconduct prevention and response, tailored for different leadership levels. It's not just checking a box, it's embedding this into the culture at every stage.
These aren't small tweaks. This is aiming for a fundamental transformation at the Academy and beyond, making it safer, more supportive, more just.
That's clearly the intent. The big question, of course, is how effectively these sweeping changes translate into real daily improvements for cadets and service members, and what it ultimately means for military justice and trust in the institution.
A critical question indeed. Okay, moving to our final segment. This seems to cover oversight, research, and the role of NOAA, the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, kind of tying things together with a look towards the future.
Exactly. It reflects that ongoing need for independent checks, strategic planning, and recognizing NOAA's absolutely vital role in understanding and protecting our oceans. It connects national security with environmental stewardship.
So starting with oversight, Section 501 calls for a GAO report on Coast Guard R&D.
Yes, a Controller General report on the Coast Guard's Research, Development, and Innovation Program. They'll look at the program's strategy, how well it supports missions, how it engages with industry and universities,
Leveraging outside expertise.
and how effectively research projects actually get turned into things the Coast Guard can use transitioning to production. It also specifically examines the Blue Tech Center of Expertise.
Blue Tech, maritime technology.
Right, ensuring that center is effective. Basically, it's about making sure the Coast Guard stays innovative, adopts cutting-edge tech, and gets the best value for its R&D investments.
Making sure taxpayer dollars are well spent on getting them the best tools, better sensors, navigation, whatever they need, which helps everyone who relies on safe seas.
Precisely.
And there are more GAO studies focused on personnel, sections 502, 507, 510.
Yes, reflecting that continuous focus on the human element. One study looks at Vessel Traffic Service Center employment, compensation, and retention.
The people managing ship traffic in busy ports.
Exactly. Assessing their pay, why they stay or leave, the workforce makeup. Another crucial study examines the Coast Guard Basic Allowance for Housing, BAH. Is it actually adequate to cover housing costs where people are stationed?
A huge issue in expensive coastal areas.
A persistent challenge. And a third study evaluates the permanent change of station PCS process. How effective, efficient, and costly are military moves?
So looking at pay, housing, and moving major quality of life factor.
Fundamental aspects. These studies aim to improve personnel management, ensure fair pay, adequate housing, and smoother moves. It all impacts the Coast Guard's ability to recruit and retain the skilled people they need. Addressing those practical everyday concerns is key to readiness and morale.
Investing in the people makes sense. And finally, NOAA gets some attention in Title VII.
Yes, significant enhancements for NOAA. It streamlines separation and retirement for the NOAA Commissioned Officer Corps, that uniform service vital for their science and operations.
Like the military, but focused on science and environment.
In a way, yes. The bill also changes rules for disposing of old survey and research vessels. Now, NOAA can keep the proceeds from selling old ships.
Oh, instead of it going back to the Treasury.
Exactly. They can keep that money specifically for buying new vessels or repairing existing ones.
That's a huge incentive for modernizing their fleet.
A really powerful tool. It means direct reinvestment. Better ships mean better climate data, more accurate weather forecasts, better understanding of ocean ecosystems. It directly benefits all of us.
Definitely. What else for NOAA? Tuna treaties.
Extensive changes to the South Pacific Tuna Treaty matters. Updated definitions, prohibited acts, penalties, licensing, enforcement, all focused on compliance and long-term sustainability for that critical fishery.
Trying to prevent overfishing and manage a shared resource?
Precisely. It highlights the complexity of international fisheries management, balancing economic interests with conservation. There's also an enhancement for the North Pacific Research Board, boosting science in another key area.
So, connecting it all, it's a holistic approach.
Yeah.
Research vessels gathering data, international agreements, protecting resources.
That's the picture. Managing our oceans from the science side with NOAA's fleet to the complex diplomacy of international treaties like the Tuna Agreement. It's all about ensuring the long-term health of these vital marine resources, which supports food security and environmental stability globally.
Wow. We have covered a ton of ground today, really diving into this legislative blueprint. We looked at Coast Guard infrastructure getting modernized, more flexibility, serious icebreaking power.
And their expanding international role.
Right. Then that deep focus on supporting personnel, faster hiring for key jobs, better family leave, and that huge comprehensive effort on behavioral health and tackling sexual assault and harassment, especially at the Academy.
A really significant push there.
We also hit on making waterways safer, tougher penalties, adapting to new tech like autonomous systems, and finally getting serious about derelict vessels.
Cleaning up those ghost ships.
And wrapping up with the NOAA modernizing their fleet, strengthening international agreements for sustainable fishing.
It all paints a picture of these agencies actively evolving, trying to equip themselves for huge challenges: climate change, new technologies, internal cultural shifts.
Yeah, it's about making sure they're not just operational, but also ethical, efficient, looking ahead.
Exactly. Forward-looking.
And it's worth saying again, right? This stuff might sound bureaucratic, wrapped up in legislative language, but it directly impacts your safety, the economy, the health of the planet.
Absolutely. It shapes the daily lives of thousands serving in the Coast Guard and NOAA, and governs the huge maritime domain they protect for all of us.
So as we navigate this increasingly complex world, this deep dive really underscores something important, doesn't it? The effectiveness of our maritime guardians. It's not just about the ships and the tech. It's fundamentally about the people, their well-being, the trust they have in the system, and also that really tricky balance between our own national interests and the global resources we all share. So here's something to think about. What further changes do you think are most critical for these agencies over the next, say, 5 or 10 years to really meet the challenges coming our way?
That's a great question to ponder. The evolution never stops.
It really doesn't. Thank you for diving deep with us today. Until next time, stay curious.